Okay, it's exactly 5:30. Let's get started. So my name is Roberta McIntyre, and I am the president and CEO of FireSafe Sonoma. FireSafe Sonoma is hosting this webinar for the Mark West area community. And thanks again for everybody for joining us. We are going to be covering 4 broad topic areas today. If I can open up my my list. Okay, so the 4 broad topic areas we're going to cover today are being prepared for fire season. We're going to talk a little bit about what you want to do when a red flag is announced. And then we're going to talk about what to do when an evacuation warning is announced. And then we're going to talk to you about what to do when an evacuation order is announced. So those are the 4 topic areas we're going to cover. So we've got a lot of stuff we want to cover within each of those elements. Real quick housekeeping items I want to go over. Just to let you all know that the chat is just for incidental conversation. If you have a question, please put it in the Q&A section rather than in chat. And then I think Lynn's gonna share some information. If we have websites and things like that that we need to share with you, we'll share that stuff with you in the chat. But if you have a specific question, please put it in the Q&A. It's easier for us to manage that way. And then we're gonna go through these topic areas with some questions and discussions with our panel. And then the last half hour thereabouts, we're gonna take a look at all the questions that have been put in there and go through them and cover them all for you guys. So let's see what else. We are recording this, just so y'all know, and we will make it available in about a week on our various platforms and websites. And also following this presentation is a survey. We'd love for you guys to fill out the survey. That's going to help us do better down the road, and it'll give us a sense for, you know, what you guys want to hear more about, particularly with regard to evacuation. So with that out of the way, I'm going to introduce our panel. I'll introduce the, first I'm going to introduce Lynn Garrick. Lynn's basically a co-producer helping me out, and she's going to kind of be, you know, she'll be here, but she's going to be working behind the scenes helping me with the chat and the Q&A. And so our 3 panelists are Misty Wood with the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office, Jeff Lemlin with Sonoma County Fire District, and Cindy Foreman with the Sonoma County Fire District. And Sonoma County Fire District, in the way I measure time, is still a relatively new organization, which is really growing by leaps and bounds. So I'm going to have the 3 of you just kind of introduce yourselves with a short bio, and then we'll jump into, you know, the Q&A. So Misty, why don't you start out?
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm the community engagement liaison for the Sheriff's Office. So on a normal day-to-day basis, I manage our community engagement unit. During crises, I co-lead our crisis communications team. So that's the team that issues evacuation orders, does all the social media to keep you informed, press conferences, etc. I responded to the Tubbs fire in 2017. I was mutual aid for the Camp Fire in 2018, and I responded to the Kincaid fire in 2019. So I've been in law enforcement a little over 3 years with 3 fires so far. So here we go. I'm happy to bring some experience today, and really glad you guys are here tonight.
Great, thanks Misty, and we do appreciate you joining us. Jeff, how about you? Tell us about your background.
Okay, hey, thanks for everyone for being here and just being proactive with getting ready for fire season. So my name's Jeff Lemlin, and I am a volunteer battalion chief for the Sonoma County Fire District. Before the Sonoma County Fire District took over the Mountain Volunteer Fire Department, I was the fire chief of Mountain Volunteer Fire Department. I've been in the fire service for about 20 years now, and I look forward to just kind of sharing information with you guys tonight. I know a lot of you as I'm looking in the participants' names, so I just thank you for being here and just being proactive with our community.
Great, thanks Jeff. And Cindy, we go way back. Tell us about yourself.
Hey, I'm also happy to be here. Cindy Foreman, I'm a division chief and fire marshal for the Sonoma County Fire District. And Jeff and I work for the same agency, even though we have different logos in the background. We're on the same team. Quite frankly, we're all on the same team here because we're all here for the greater good of the community, right? So I've got 25 years in the fire service, and I, like my colleagues here, and all the way through into 2019, I keep saying, I probably say it once a week, I've had 3 once-in-a-career kind of events in the last 3 years, being the Tubbs fire, the Kincaid fire, and now COVID. So I'm on my 3rd one in 3 years. So I don't know what that's trying to tell me, but I'm really happy that all of you are here. We have a great community, a very engaged and active community in the Marquess watershed. And we're just very happy that you're here. And we just want to kind of share information. A lot of it you already know, but it never hurts to have a refresher. In the fire service and law enforcement, we train every single day because these things need to be muscle memory for us. And we're looking to give our community that muscle memory when it comes to fire season and emergency preparedness. So thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of like politics or any major campaign. You have to keep saying the same thing over and over again, right? To make sure your message really resonates and sticks. So one of the first things I wanted to ask you guys about is in terms of, you know, when NOAA indicates that there's going to be a red flag warning or severe fire weather, and we put up the red flags at our fire stations, letting people know that it's a red flag day. You know, during the fire season, if you will, we know that a lot of entities like CAL FIRE staff up, but when there's a red flag warning like that, do you guys or CAL FIRE, do they add additional staffing to what's already out there? Jeff, do you or Cindy want to handle that one?
I think I'll grab it first and then Jeff can dovetail off me. That's a great question, Roberta. So when we move into that kind of critical weather pattern, that critical fire, you know, predicted fire behavior, what we, you know, really try to do, and this is new since the 2017 Tubbs fire, is off-duty firefighters. So we augment our staffing. We start putting firefighters on additional units. We put units out on patrol, which means they're literally out in these kind of vulnerable neighborhoods. If you see a fire engine driving through your neighborhood and they don't have lights and siren on and they don't look nervous, you shouldn't be nervous. You should be really happy that you see them out there, right? Now, trust me, if there's something going on, you're going to get that when that fire engine goes by. But if they're out cruising your neighborhood, give them a wave and say thank you, because we're literally putting those extra boots on the ground and those engines out in these neighborhoods so that we are ready when something happens. We can jump on it quickly, keep it small, and you know, hopefully, you know, not get us into some of the trouble we've been into. The other thing that we do is Sonoma County Fire District has, as most of you know, we have 24-hour staff stations, and then we also have volunteer staff stations. So I'm gonna let Jeff jump in and kind of address what we do with our volunteer and even our more remote stations when we move into these critical fire weather red flag days.
Thanks, Cindy. So I think kind of Cindy hit the nail on the head. We staff up in strategic locations. So fires repeat themselves, and it's really important for all of us that live in Sonoma County and Napa County to know our history and what areas are prone to be high hazard areas. So one of the areas, as everybody knows, is the Station 6, Station 5 response area. So what is that? That's Porter Creek, Petrified Forest Road, Calistoga Road. Historically, that's been the tip of the spear for the Hanley Fire, the Tubbs Fire, and even more kind of north during the Kincaid Fire. So during a red flag warning, you're going to see engines patrolling those areas. And when you're really going to see it heightened is when those winds come to fruition. Because sometimes we have red flag warnings that are with a forecasted wind event, and it's weather, right? So it doesn't always come to fruition. But I guarantee you, when you have the wind that's there, you're going to see engines patrolling that, and they're not sleeping at the fire station. We're up all night and we're patrolling these areas. We're at vantage points where we can see for a long ways away. We have the fire cameras up, and we're in a constant state of readiness. So Station 6, which you guys know is located on Sharp Road. Right now, we're going through a rebuild process to kind of get 2 bedrooms there and get it more living quarters up to date. Right now, we have a trailer there. So you'll see volunteers in the trailer. Volunteers will be staffing up at our Middle Rincon station. So we're really going to be front loading any kind of events so that we can get onto these fires when they're small and helping to make the appropriate notifications and calling in the right resources. So I can guarantee you as a community that's one of the things that we've learned during the Tubbs fire was how critical it is to be front loaded and ready like we were for the Kincaid fire. Does that answer your question, Roberta?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jeff. Now with that in mind, like if I'm, a member of the community and I see all these resources running around and now I know based on what you guys are saying that those resources are there. That doesn't mean I need to drop my guard and not know how to get out or be, set up to leave. So with evacuation routes, I mean, some of us don't know where to go. Maybe Jeff, can you kind of tell us real quickly about, how I can figure out an evacuation route or know 2 ways out, or can you speak to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something that we should know, even in the wintertime, when we have these storms that hit up at this higher elevation and we have large trees fall down and block the roadway. It's always good to know alternate routes out of your neighborhood. And some of these areas up here on the hill only have 1 way out. And so that's when we come in and try to educate about having chainsaws and people that are out here in the country and know your neighbors. But just we always try to reiterate to have 2 ways out. So historically speaking, when we have these red flag warnings and we have these red flag events, the wind's coming from the north and the northeast, and that's where our threat is. And looking at the Hanley fire, the Kincaid fire, the Tubbs fire, the origin of those fires have all been kind of close to where they're at. So usually what I educate people that live on the top of the, the Mayacamas mountain range, top of Calistoga Road, is that we want to head down into Santa Rosa. So just knowing kind of your geographical location and how to get off the top of the mountain. And depending on where you live, that's going to determine, your best access to get out. It might even be diving down into Napa County if you're up on the top of St. Helena Road. But we try to get you down into the flats. And the reason for that is because, the wind is higher up here and the fire behavior is more extreme. But getting to an area and having 2 ways out and working ahead of time, just like we practice 2 ways out in your house, right? So, and just the biggest thing with evacuation is having a pre-plan and having those decisions already made so that when those events happen, you don't have to formulate that plan. It's already set in stone.
Right. Okay, great. And I know, having been the fire marshal, there's always been a problem with gates. Like if I'm evacuated, I'm gone, and law or fire needs to get through a gate or onto my property. There are ways to make it easier for law and fire. Misty, can you maybe talk to us a little bit about what the sheriff's office is doing to get gate codes into the system? Like if I have a gate code, can I get it into dispatch? How does all that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's 2 different sort of ways for law, or there's a way for law to get in through your gate, and there's a way for fire to get in through your gate. So for law, when you have a gate that's locked and you've got a code to get through, we don't have access to that code unless you tell us. So what we ask is if you have a gate and you have a gate code, we want you to call dispatch. That phone number is 565-2121. You can call them anytime. They're on 24/7. Call them and let them know what your address is and what your gate code is. And so what that does is when a deputy is going to your house to notify you of an evacuation or respond to a call for service, if you've called for help for some reason, we can't get through that gate unless we've got the code. We can get through the gate without the code, but you don't want us to. The better way is for us to use the gate code so we're not damaging your property on our way in. We certainly can get through, but we'd much rather have the gate code. And so when a deputy's in the field, when he or she comes up to your property, he or she can just ask, hey, dispatch, do you have the gate code? Gate code, dispatch can radio it over, deputy enters it in and drives right into your property. our system is secure too. So when you give us your gate code, it's securely into our dispatch system. So we would ask you, if you haven't done that already, we would ask you to do that very soon. And then also, as you update your code, don't forget to call dispatch again and update us with the new code.
So when you're talking about fire access for gates, it's a little different than the sheriff's department. There are requirements here in the county. If you put in a gate, whether it be a manual gate or it be an electric or a solar gate, that you put in what's called the Knox products, K-N-O-X. They do padlocks as well as gate override switches. Those are required in the county when you put a gate in, as is the size and dimension of that gate, which is really important, right? If you can make it too small for our fire apparatus, you may not meet what we call the fire safe standards, which is really important. When you put a gate in, you want to be sure everybody, not just sheriff's department, but fire engines can get through that gate, right? So we really encourage you, if you're going to put in a gate, reach out. Go online, look at the fire safe standards, reach out to us, and we will get you lined up with how to get the right product to have an override for the fire department. We carry special keys that are locked, secured, and that we can go and override a gate and open it up very quickly. We don't have to get out, we don't have to break things, we don't have to do anything. And so it's really important that you do that. It's really important that you get a permit when you pull your gate so that you get it to the right size so you can get everybody in there that needs to be in there.
Actually, I have another question I think I want to toss your way, Misty, is about the alerts. And maybe Cindy or Jeff can weigh in on this as well. But there's all different kinds of systems out there. We have weather radios. We've got Nixle, we've got SoCo Alert. Is there one do-all system, or should I subscribe to all of those, or what's the best way to go there?
And Roberta, I'm really glad you brought that up, because there is no one perfect system, right? So there's a lot of different ways that you can find out about an evacuation warning or an evacuation order, which I'll go into detail more later on. The important thing to remember is that redundancy is really important. You can't be over-informed when there's a fire nearby, right? So when it comes to the alert system, the county owns the alert and warning system. The county owns that program, the County Department of Emergency Management. The sheriff's office, though, also does alerting to support those efforts, because just like Cindy was alluding earlier, we're all on the same team, right? It is a team effort to keep everybody safe and to get everybody out during a fire. So County Department of Emergency Management issues SoCo Alert. That is an opt-in system. So that means that you have to go to socoalert.com and register yourself with your addresses to be notified by that system. So if you haven't done that already, please put that on your to-do list sooner rather than later. So that way you can get the county notifications. The county is starting to use the NOAA weather radios. So they can issue an emergency alert through that. So if you have a NOAA weather radio, it'll go off, it'll go off with that alert. They also use the emergency alert system, which is transmitted through TV and radio. So it has that sort of irritating beep at the beginning that gets your attention very intentionally, right? And then issues the emergency alert from there. Yeah. So we're trying to get all of the alert and warning out kind of at the same time or simultaneously to get that information to you. So on the sheriff's office side, while the county is doing their part with the alert and warning program, we have multiple tools in our toolbox to reach you. One of the tools that we have is Nixle. Nixle, you probably are all familiar with, but if you're not, again, it's an opt-in program. So make sure that you go to nixle.com and sign up for that if you haven't already. I recommend going to the website as opposed to texting your zip code, because when you go on to nixle.com, you can customize how you want to get that information. You have a little bit more control over what you receive and how you receive it. And when I've talked to people, they tend to like that a little bit better than just getting every alert always. Mm-hmm. We have deputies who are what we call boots on the ground. So if there's an evacuation order, our deputies are going door to door to door to notify you that there's an evacuation that you have to leave. That's one way you might find out about it. We also have what are called high-low sirens. This is relatively new. I'm going to play a sample for you so you guys can hear it. But the high-low siren is a really distinct two-tone siren that we have on all of our patrol cars that we implemented about a year ago. And when you hear the high-low, it's time to go. This is a siren we only use during an evacuation as one more way to let you know that it's time to evacuate. So I'm going to play that for you right now. So if you're not familiar with it, you will be soon.
And Misty, we also have implemented those on all of our apparatus as well. We may not be there with all of it, but many of our command vehicles and our engines are outfitted with that same high-low siren.
Awesome. Thank you for that. It's really good to know. So you're getting consistency between your law and your fire partners. So when you hear this, this means it's time to evacuate. So it's definitely different than what you hear on a fire engine or what you hear on a patrol car. So if you hear that siren, it's also time to evacuate. And then the last tool that we will use is social media. And we don't consider it a tool, but it's a way to kind of amplify that message. And there's no way for it to sort of, it depends on what your settings are on your phone. We can do local alerts through social media, but we don't really rely on that as an alerting tool, but it's a really good way to continue to get the message out there through our social media platforms that there's an evacuation warning or order. A lot of times people will just happen to be on social media and they'll see it, or they'll see it and they'll call their friend who lives in the area, or a lot of times the media is watching that. So we rely on our media partners to share that message and start reporting it. And as soon as we issue evacuation warning, let me tell you, if we issue an evacuation warning or an order on social media, our phones blow up. The media is constantly watching it. And it's a really good thing because it's one more way that you might hear about that is through your TV or radio. The last alert piece that I missed earlier that the county has is what's called wireless emergency alerts. So that is it's like an Amber Alert on your cell phone. So it's really important, especially during fire season, especially during red flag warnings, to make sure that you have your cell phone turned on next to your bed, because that's where you're going to get potentially a wireless emergency alert from the county, potentially a phone call from the county, a text message via Nixle. So it's really important to think about making sure that you have access to those alerts as they're getting pushed out during an event.
Great, thanks, Misty. I think I like to look at the whole ensemble of emergency alert and warnings as it's kind of like if you're going to go outside and play in the snow, you're not going to go out there with just a jacket on.
Right.
You're going to go out there with your jacket, your mittens, your beanie, and your shoes, and maybe even snow pants. You have to have all of that ensemble on you, to be safe and warm if you play in the snow. I think it's the same thing with this, ensemble of emergency alert devices and systems. No one's going to do the trick for everything. So it's good to have, be familiar with all of it and use as much as, you're capable of.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. I like that.
And so,
I think one of the biggest things is redundancy, but in particular to the NOAA weather radios, you need to make sure that it has what's called SAME technology. That way it can actually receive our local text messages, our local Nixle alerts. Not all NOAA weather radios have the ability to do that.
I think the thing that I want to reiterate, and I think we would all echo this comment, is when you get that advisory, warning, alert, information through WIA, through SOCO, through Nixle, what we need you to not do is we need you to not vet that through our 911 dispatch. We get that you're going to get that message and you're going to go, holy cow, is this real? Is this? We need you to not call 911 and vet that, because I will tell you that will completely overrun our system, and it has happened. It happened in the 2017 firestorms. It happened in the 2019 firestorms, right? Let's leave those dispatchers available for the real need in the community. When you get that message, if you feel like you need to vet it, we've just given you 4 or 5 different resources to be able to vet it. That can be through social media, websites, turn on the radio, turn on the television, go to alert wildfire cameras. that literally has been one of the most amazing tools I've ever seen in my career related to wildfire, is those alert wildfire cameras, because that just gives you a bird's eye view on what is happening in your vicinity. And there's 14 of them or something in our county, and you can click on it and you can see where that column is, where that fire is. So please, 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 please do not call our 911 dispatch to vet out that you just got this alert or advisory or message or whatever it is. Take responsibility. I keep telling people the one thing we all have to do is we have to take our power back, right? I ask this question often to community groups. Tell me how many firefighters you think are on duty at the station down the street from your house. Just give me a ballpark number. And I hear numbers like 12 and 14 and 10. And I say, it's anywhere between 3 and 5. And so you're talking about a community with 4, 5, 10, 15,000 people, and you have 3 or 4 firefighters on duty within a 5-mile radius of you. They are not, and add the deputies to that, there aren't 3 or 4 or 5 of them likely within a 5-mile radius. And Misty was talking about that their responsibility is evacuations. And yes, in a perfect world, they're going to go to, and they do at some point go to every address to evacuate you, but that may not happen in the heat of the battle, right? We have to take our power back. When you get that message, when you see that information come through, take your power back, vet it another way.
I'm really glad you brought that up, Cindy, about taking your power back. One of the questions a lot is, how do I know if I have to evacuate? Like, what is that moment when I know? And my response is always, if you feel unsafe, evacuate. You are responsible for your safety. You are responsible for your family's safety. We have, as you know, we just went over, a dozen different ways that we can get a hold of you, but there are times where your instincts are kicking in, and that's what keeps us safe. That's what keeps you guys safe, and that's what keeps all of us safe. That little lizard brain, that little
our deputies call it the spidey sense, right? When
exactly.
you get your spidey sense, like, it's time to act. When your spidey senses go off, it's time to act.
Absolutely. So don't wait for us to tell you what to do. Take your power back. Even if you feel in danger, but you haven't heard from the sheriff's office, you haven't seen a firefighter yet, it doesn't matter. If you feel like you're safe, leave. The worst case scenario is you just come. No big deal.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Missy, I always like to talk for a minute about how we make decisions on the fire ground. Is we kind of have a process to help us make decisions, and I like to talk about that as it relates to evacuations. And we have trigger points on the fire ground. If this happens, if the fire gets to this point, then we're going to do this. So when you have that decision already made, what you're going to do when there's an evacuation warning and what you're going to do when there's a mandatory evacuation, that decision's already made. You already know your 2-way out. You already know what you're going to grab. Your home is already hardened, because that's not something we're going to be doing when we're getting an evacuation warning. You're already going to have your cell phones charged, your gas tanks full, and your animals taken care of. And so that when that trigger happens, then you just go to that next step, right? That decision's already made. It helps to make it an expeditious decision.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And thanks, Jeff. You just kind of touched on, I think you just kind of wrapped up what we want to do as a precursor to getting that evacuation warning. And Cindy, I just wanted to remind folks, I think the takeaway really from what you said there, for me anyway, is, don't call 911 for the 411. Call them if it's really an emergency.
I got to write that down. That's good, Roberta. That's good.
Yeah, don't call them up just for information. They don't have time for that. They're handling, getting resources to where they need to be to put out the fire.
We've got enough alternate resources out there for information that should be your last call. I'm never going to tell you not to call 911 if you need it, if you're in danger, if you're threatened, if you're trapped, if you're I'm not saying don't call 911. I'm saying don't call them, as Roberta said, to get the 411. Call them if you need them. Never going to tell you not to do that.
Yeah. Okay. So then So, and I'm going to kind of wrap up this section because we're running out of time. I want to jump to the next section. But the other part about this, I just want to remind folks is, you know, when you get that spidey sense and the red flags out there, you know, like Jeff said, things to do. You know, bring your lawn furniture inside, anything combustible off your deck, or get that 0 to 5 foot non-combustible zone around your house clear. You know, take a moment to rake all the dry leaves away from your house, stuff like that. Things you can do really quickly. Make sure your car is already in the driveway, not in the garage, so you don't have to fuss with trying to open the garage door. Make sure your car is already packed. Make sure it's pointing out. All these things, be ready to go before you even get that warning. You know, and certainly when you get the warning, make sure you do all those things. So with that said, you know, let's say that I got on one of these alert systems. I have the warning. I don't have the order to evacuate. Now I'm in the warning mode. You know, what do we do there, Cindy? Can you kind of kick that off? You know,
So
what,
that's a great question, Roberta, because I think when we're talking about warning and then, you know, the order, right? Warning is, hey, look, something's going on close to you. It's a threat to your community. We're not at the point where we're telling you mandatory get the heck out. But I'm going to tell you that in this day and age that we're living in, if you get a warning, in my opinion, it's time to start thinking about getting out. And at the bare minimum, as Roberta said, and I'm gonna give you a few things really quickly that I think are really important that were, you know, I've spent a lot of time interviewing people following the Tubbs fire to find out what some of their struggles, mistakes, successes were, so that we can learn from this, right? And I can't tell you how many people I talked to after the Tubbs fire that said, you know, most of those people had 5 minutes if they were lucky, right? Most of those people had 5 minutes if they were lucky. But I will tell you that it was overwhelming how many people said they lost their car keys. They went out, they unlocked their car, they got it turned around, they did all this, and then they couldn't find their car keys. So that is number one for me. If you're gonna get your car set up and ready to go, again, I can't preach enough to you muscle memory, right? Muscle memory. Put your keys in your pocket and do not take them out for love or money, or have a plan. Put them, whatever, hook them onto the windshield wipers on the windshield, if that's what you got to do, so that at least they're in your face. But you know, the car keys was such a big thing for people, was because your brain becomes scrambled eggs when you get into that mode. It just does. Look, there is a reason that police and fire train as much as they do, because we have to be able to react under pressure. The general public, y'all are not used to that, right? So, and that's why Roberta was talking, we have to practice, we have to plan. Why do you think that kids have to do a fire drill every single month in school, right? These kids literally get up like zombies and go, oh my God, we're supposed to quietly walk out of the school and go to our meeting place, right? It's muscle memory for them, right? There's a reason for that. So we have to practice that in our own lives. So you've got that warning, right? Which a lot of times those warnings could give you an hour, they could give you a half hour, they could give you 6 hours. We don't really know what that looks like when you get a warning. But my advice to you is, if you are in a vulnerable area, if you are in a high fire danger zone, if you have a vulnerable population, if you have hoof stock, if you have challenges to your evacuation, do it then, right then and there. Start getting ready and leave. If you and your husband or wife and the dog's already in the car and you've got time and you want to prep your house for that fire front, there are things you can do if you have the time and if it's safe to do so. So when firefighters arrive on a scene, and I'll let Jeff tagline on this, but when we arrive on a scene and we commit to a property that we're going to try to defend, we take some critical steps that we do to try to make that home defendable, or more defendable, if you will. So I'll let Jeff tagline onto that. And those are some of the things you can do to prep your home before you leave. And that's, again, under warning. If you are told to evacuate, get out. If you have a warning and you have the time and all your ducks are in a row and you're not looking for your keys, and I'm telling you, people took their phone chargers, but they didn't take their phones. People took, didn't take shoes, but they took their underwear. There's just, look, you got to have your ducks in a row. And I'm telling you right now, post that list. And where I jokingly tell people to post that list is post it in the bathroom, because where do you sit down for the longest? It's in the bathroom. Post it on the wall in the bathroom, because you're gonna commit that to memory at some point, staring at that thing every single day. But have a copy on the refrigerator. And that's my plan with my family, because I live in 2 counties that are both very high fire severity zones. I literally have a list on the refrigerator, and I tell my family, when it happens, grab that list. Don't talk to each other. Don't have conversations. Grab the list, and the list is what you do. Period. End of sentence. That's it. That's all. So Jeff, you want to kind of talk about what we do in as far as prepping a home?
Yes, I would love to. I don't want to miss this opportunity to talk about the first fatality of the Tubbs fire, which was on Mountain Home Ranch Road, as it directly related to keys in a vehicle. So the subject was made contact, told to evacuate. He had a newer truck, couldn't find the keys, and he ended up being the first fatality of the Tubbs fire. So what you said regarding keys is real. So what we do as firefighters when we come in, and I have a saying, and it might seem a little harsh, but when we come in to assess a property, there's certain things that we need to have to be able to come in and make a difference. And one of the things that I say is, if you don't care, we can't care. So if we come into that property and there's firewood up against the house, the gutters are full of leaves, there's no defensible space. Roberta talked about it a little bit, the 0 to 5 foot zone, which we call the non-combustible zone. If you have a bunch of debris there and you have yard art all over the place, there's not much that we can do. But when we come in and assess a house, let me tell you what it looks like when it's a house that we're going to come in and defend. That there's a water source there for us. There might be a homeowner ladder up to the roof, because the roof is the first area that's going to have problems. So besides having a ladder and a water source, there's going to be an area for the firefighters to turn around. There's going to be an area that we can take refuge if that fire front comes through. Because we're going to risk our lives a lot in a calculated manner to save lives, and we're going to risk our lives a little in a calculated manner to save savable property. So to make your property savable, you need to have a good defensible space. Your roof needs to be a Class A non-combustible. So what is a Class A non-combustible roof? You're going to have good shingles that are healthy, a metal roof. You're not going to have vegetation over that roof line. You're going to have dual pane windows. And so all of these things that we're assessing in the matter of a couple minutes, and it's a quick assessment, and we're going to be doing a hot lap around that house. We're going to be turning our engines around so that we can get out. We're going to make sure that you guys are not there. What was so successful during the Kincaid fires, everybody evacuated ahead of time. We did not have to come in and get people out of those neighborhoods. We didn't have to worry about life safety. We still assessed these homes and these structures for life, but we were able to come in and set up to fight the fire. And a big difference between the Tubbs and the Kincaid. One thing I want to reiterate to you guys is that when we have these wind-driven fires, it doesn't matter if we have 1,000 fire engines. There's very limited things that we can do with these wind-driven fires if there's not good defensible space, if there's not a good area for us to kind of anchor and hold the fire. We're kind of at the mercy of the weather. And I heard the division chief of CAL FIRE say the other day, what do you guys think the problem was with the Tubbs fire and the Kincaid fire? People said global warming, the wind. And at the end of the day, he said, the problem is you're living in areas that you probably should not live in. And I'm one of those people, right? And we live there because it's beautiful. There's trees, it's quiet most of the time, and we're out in the country. But with that comes some personal responsibility to take some ownership, which we're trying to educate you guys, to take your power back, to defend your home, right? To make it defensible. We're doing this in the wintertime, before the summertime, because we don't want to be weed whacking in the wintertime, right? So we're hardening our home with gutter guards and making sure that 0 to 5 foot non-defensible space is there, the non-combustible, the 30 to 60 zone, the 60 to 100. And it's all based upon slope, and slope will dictate how fast the fire moves. So there's many variables. There's a lot of resources that we're going to give you at the end of this webinar on how to harden your home. But coming in on the fire engine, we're doing a quick assessment, making sure that you're evacuated, making sure the water source, making sure we have ladders to the roof, making sure that we can get out and that we're not going to lose our lives while trying to save a home which is replaceable.
Yeah, great point, Jeff. And, you know, to really tag on to what Jeff was talking about related to the 2019 Kincaid fire, is a really important fact that I need the public to understand is there were a few factors that made that fire a game changer for us. And number one was there were no other campaign fires in California going on. There wasn't a single campaign fire that was drawing down California resources like there are right now as we speak, and there's a new one down south that just blew up. We are about a month and a half ahead of where we really wanted to be or should be when it comes to fuel moisture and fire behavior. We're having fires now that are acting like they would a month and a half ahead, right? And we are predicted to have a long fall this year. We're looking at a possible El Nino for next year, next winter. And that essentially means that we're not looking for, you know, really significant precipitation till probably January. What does that mean for all of us? Doesn't mean we're out of the woods once we get through October. It means that likely November, and I'm sorry to tell you this, even December can be vulnerable months for us. We have actually had units on conflagrations on campaign fires down south in December at Christmas time. We've had that. I'm sure Jeff's been probably on those, or his agency in Nevada or with Sonoma County has been on those. So we've got a long fall ahead of us, and we're already a month ahead of where we should be with how fuels and fire behavior is acting. So I always say this, I'm not here to scare you, I'm here to prepare you. Keep that in the back of your mind. And, you know, Jeff made really great points of try to, you know, make your home as defendable as you can, because I'm telling you, as harsh as this is to say, there are literally homes that we either are familiar with or we will look at with our window, with our windshield view and say, that's a loser. That's a loser. Sorry, we got to move on. That's a loser. And that is really hard for me to say out loud to the public because we are public servants and our job is to protect life and property. But what's the first one in that? It's life, right? And if that property is not somewhere that we feel like we can dig in and defend and be successful without losing our lives, that's not going to happen. And then the second thing about the Kincaid fire is that we did a mass evacuation. We were not fighting evacuees to get fire engines. And I'm telling you, there were a lot of them moving into these neighborhoods in Windsor to stop this fire. Because quite frankly, had we not stopped this fire in Windsor, it would have run to the coast. That was absolutely all of the mapping, modeling, and I know some people are finding that hard to believe. All I have to do is show you that aerial view of the smoke plume, and that fire was predicted by all the experts there were out there to run to the coast had we not stopped it in Windsor. And we were able to do that because of the mass amount of resources, and we were not fighting evacuees to get in there and do the job that needed to be done, right? So we can't stress enough how important it is to really, as Jeff has said, as I keep repeating this, he said, take your power back, take responsibility for where you live, take responsibility for your property, give us a fighting chance.
I'd like to add a couple things too. I just want to take a quick step back and just define a couple of terms. There's two terms that you should be familiar with as we head into fire season, and that is evacuation warning and evacuation order. So those are the terms that we've all decided, law enforcement and fire, we've all decided those are the terms that we're going to use so that we can communicate more easily with our community members. Because it's hard if, you know, a few years ago we were all using kind of different variations of the term, and that's not, it's confusing, right? So evacuation warning means prepare to evacuate. It's optional. You don't have to leave, but listen to what Cindy was saying and Jeff was saying about all these reasons why you might want to leave now, all the preparations that you should be doing. An evacuation order is mandatory. It's not optional. It's required. Get out, right? So those are the two terms that you should be familiar with. When we're talking about evacuation warnings and kind of things to be thinking about, a situation where the sheriff's office would issue an evacuation warning, I'm going to use Kincaid as an example to give you kind of some context about our decision-making process and, you know, kind of when we do one or the other. When the Kincaid fire kicked off, we started doing evacuation, we issued an evacuation order immediately right where the fire was kicking off. So Pine Flat and kind of that area. Our deputies were on the ground. They were working with the firefighters. They were talking and they could see the way the fire was moving. They could see it was moving fast. They could see the direction it was moving. And listening to our fire partners, realized the town of Geyserville was threatened, that it was possible the fire was heading in that direction. That's when we issued that evacuation warning for the town of Geyserville that first night. So it wasn't in immediate danger. The fire wasn't in Geyserville, but we could see it was heading in that direction and it may very well get there. That's when we would issue a warning, an evacuation warning. So it was something, you know, the message was something like evacuation warning for town of Geyserville, big fire on Pine Flat Road, prepare to evacuate. It was something very, very short. It was crazy. When the fire first kicks off, it's pretty nuts. And so you just get as much information out as quickly as you can. But that's kind of something to think about to give you some context of when we might issue a warning or an order. The other thing I'd want to say is it's a good time during a warning to check in with your neighbors. Like we know from Tubbs, we know that helping neighbors saves lives. So it's a good time to check in with them while you've got the time under a warning scenario. And it's also a good time to tune in. This is the time for you to get your situational awareness. You've packed your car, you've checked in with your family, you've checked with your neighbors. So tune into reliable sources of information. I caution you with social media because let's be honest, not everything on social media is legit. And I can't tell you how many stupid things I've seen on there, but check in on reliable sources. So Sheriff's Office Facebook page or Twitter page, the fire district's social media, KSRO's done a fantastic job in the past, news stations, places like that, and SoCoEmergency.org. Those are all really good resources for reliable information to help you in your decision-making process.
Misty, it's funny. I like that you focused on reliable information. According to Facebook, during the Valley Fire, my house burned down. That's incredibly stressful.
Yeah.
And it actually didn't, but incredibly stressful. But I want to ask you, Misty, with regard to evacuation warnings and planning, it's my understanding that the county is dividing, or the sheriff's dividing the county up in evacuation zones.
Mm-hmm.
So if I get something through Nixle or other media format that says, Zone 21, you're on evacuation warning, how do I know if I'm in Zone 21 or not? How do people know what zone they're in?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up because that's kind of our newest project. So we're working with County Department of Emergency Management. We're functionally starting the process of mapping evacuation zones for the county and then handing it off to Department of Emergency Management for planning and more detailed mapping through GIS. So what we're looking at is dividing the county into reasonable size zones that make sense for evacuation, but honestly, just as importantly or more importantly, reentry and repopulation. Because when we lift evacuation orders, it's, for some reason, it feels more confusing to me than when we're issuing evacuation orders. It's always like, well, till what street? And you don't let people back in the same way that you get people out. So it's been chaotic, and we're trying to improve that process. So once those maps are ready, the Sheriff's Office is gonna do a public education campaign, and I'm sure Department of Emergency Management will as well, to get the maps online, notify people they're there. And so once that announcement is made, my recommendation for everybody here is to go to the website, find your address, see what zone you're in, and write it down on the evacuation list that's in your bathroom, because that's what Cindy recommended. So doing it is write that down so you know you're in zone 21 or 6BA or whatever the zone numbers end up being, because we're going to use that in, ultimately, once that mapping is finalized, we're going to use those numbers in our evacuation warnings and our evacuation orders. We're still going to include a description of what that is, but it's one more way for us to more quickly communicate clear information to you and to help make the process easier when you're returning to your home or to your property.
It's just another great tool the county's been working on, and collectively with fire and other agencies. That mapping program is huge, and that is going to be a amazing leap forward for us in how we manage evacuations and more importantly, as Misty stated, repopulation. So we've sat down with our stakeholders in that, just even in parts of our district, and that will help all of our agencies to really identify those areas. So yeah, that's it. We're not there yet, but we're really working aggressively toward that program.
Yeah.
Jeff, did you have something you wanted to add to that, or?
One thing, a lot of these things has to do with that we're talking about fire safety are living documents, right? Things are evolving as new technology comes up, whether it's the fire camera, the way that we alert people. All of this is evolving. And one thing that I can promise to everyone that is on this webinar right now is that we will get you the best information that we have up to date to help inform you when there's situations going on. And we're an open book, and we're always kind of trying to stay on the cutting edge of technology. And as everybody knows, that's moving at a fast pace.
I just kind of want to take a moment and summarize what we've covered so far. So, you know, folks, from what I'm hearing you guys say is, for even before I get the evacuation warning, you know, if I'm seeing with my situational awareness is what I'm going to call it, you know, or spidey sense, if I'm seeing, you know, if I'm receiving information that makes me wonder what's going on. It's been hot. We've had a drought. It's been hot for days, you know, and the weather is getting windy, and gosh, we're in a red flag, you know, warning. That's the time I really need to be at least thinking about, what am I going to do when I get that warning? You know, maybe I'll make sure and not put the car in the garage. I want to make sure the car has fuel. I want to walk around the house and make sure there's not leaves and stuff piled up. I want to make sure my gate, if it's a wooden fence, can open up and be blocked open. So if the fence catches on fire, it's not going to catch the house on fire. I don't want to get into the weeds about defensible space or home hardening, but those are areas also that I want folks to be aware of. Before you even, you know, get your situational awareness going, these are things you got to do now. Make your defensible space, do your structural hardening now. And then when you get that red flag warning, that's the time to be thinking, where's my car keys? Okay, they're here, they're gonna stay here. Where's that list? And I wanted to mention with regard to lists, there's thousands of different kind of lists out there. Red Cross has lists, FEMA has lists, Sonoma County has lists, every fire department has a list. And I look at lists like, if you go online, you can get a list on what to pack for a trip in your luggage. That's a real generic list. I've used those lists, but I also tailor it for my own uses. So with regard to lists, find one that sort of works for you and then make it your own. Make sure you have the things you need on there. If you don't have pets, you can cross off everything related to pets. You don't worry about that. But definitely have a list. A list, Cindy, you're right. Having a list when you're anxious and stressed and trying to figure out, you know, where you're going to go, what you're going to take. If you can grab that list and go down it, makes life a whole lot easier.
And I say this in my family, it's non-negotiable. If I give you this list, this is the list you follow. We don't have discussion about it.
Yeah.
You go and you do that, because you know, we all know, I mean, I'm a type A personality. Many of us in our business are type A's, right? Like we're control freaks, right? We're control freaks, right? Like we know how to run the show. We know how to mitigate emergencies. So, you know, you really got to say, that's why I say the list is the list. It's not negotiable, right? But Roberta makes a great point. Like my list is different than the list of a mom with 3 kids. I got 2 dogs. My list is different. I got a senior mother. My list is different than your list. So Roberta makes a great point that you got to, you know, do your homework, get out there and look at different lists and find one that fits you, fits your lifestyle, fits your family, fit you. If you're a farmer, if you've got hoof stock, look, your list is going to be very different, and your prep is going to be very different than mine is going to be.
Mhm.
And so the other thing too to think about is that, you know, if you have vulnerable people in your family, and I mean seniors, I mean those with disabilities or handicaps or things that are a challenge to them. Look, when we go into red flag warnings, when we go into PSPS events, if you've got, you know, your 90-year-old mother-in-law that lives, you know, on Mark West Springs Road, but she's hell-bent on being independent, and you go into red flag warning or you go into PSPS or whatever it may be the time that you say, hey, guess what? The grandkids really want to see you down in Santa Cruz. You know what? Let's do a little day trip down there. Look, we got to kind of look out for that vulnerable population, right? Because I think, or maybe you need a slumber party, right? Grandma needs to come spend the night with the grandkids because we don't want to leave her alone. We don't want to worry about her. We need to start getting creative how we're looking after those vulnerable populations, because, you know, one thing that I've said in every community event I've ever had the opportunity to speak in, and I witnessed this in the 2017 Tubbs fire, is that I saw so many more heroes that didn't have a uniform and didn't have a badge, that saved lives, way more than any of us out there with a badge or a uniform or a red truck or a, you know, a sheriff's vehicle or a, you know, law enforcement vehicle. There was neighbor saving neighbor, human saving human. And so, you know, that is the point that we have to take away from this. And that is why the COPE program is such a big thing, is we have to build these communities within these communities, right? We can't, remember, there's only 3 to 5 firefighters down the street. There's only maybe 2 deputies within this span. Like, we can't do it all. Take your power back, but look out for the vulnerable population. If you got a sweet little old lady that lives next door that makes your kids zucchini bread every 5 days, have her come over and spend the night. I don't know. Maybe you do something to really look out for that neighbor, but take care of the vulnerable population.
Yeah. I wanted to touch on a couple things, if it's okay, during an evacuation order. So remember, that's when it is not optional. You do have to leave. There's a couple things there. Don't hesitate to evacuate when you receive an evacuation order. Don't hesitate because of COVID. Don't hesitate because you think you're going to defend your property. Don't hesitate because you think it's a big deal. It's not optional, and there's a reason for that, right? We work really closely with our fire partners to determine when something is, you know, when we need to make that call. It means that your life is in danger right now. And so I want to reiterate that I've heard from some people that they're scared to evacuate because of COVID. They don't know where they're going to shelter, or they don't want to be in a shelter with COVID. And I get that. So it's important to remember, fire is an immediate threat to your life right now. And it's the more pressing of the emergencies, right? So you might want to think about a couple of places you can stay in advance. Like, think of 2 areas, if you can, that are preferably out of county, friends or family you can stay with who are comfortable taking you in if the shelters make you nervous. The county is planning on how to manage COVID during shelters during COVID, but we're all obviously more comfortable with friends or family than we are in a shelter environment. And make sure that you add masks and hand sanitizer to your go bag. Cindy, you mentioned that we all have different lists, and frankly, we all have different go bags. My dog has her own go bag now after I had to evacuate during.
Yep.
Right? She's my daughter. She's my
That's
girl.
right. I'm there.
Right? So I've got all of her food and her leashes and extra stuff for her that I made after Kincaid. After I evacuated during Kincaid, I realized she needed hers. Yep. And I updated my go bag this season and went, oops, now I need masks and masks and sanitizer for myself now too. So just things to think about. We're in a different area. And I just don't, it makes me nervous when I hear people say that they're not going to leave because they're concerned about COVID. So Jeff, do you have something to add to that too?
Yeah, one thing that, since we're kind of really hammering down the evacuation warning and evacuation orders, one thing that it's hard for people to understand is what it's like to be in a firestorm. And you might get that evacuation order and your senses aren't up because the fire's not there yet. But the fire behavior that we experienced during the Kincaid and Tubbs fires, this fire was spotting well over 2 miles ahead of itself. So when you're in a place that's in alignment with the head of that fire, and we give the evacuation order, we're going to be doing that before that fire, hopefully before that fire hits to where you're at. So you don't want to wait until that ember shower comes. So imagine you're standing in the worst rainstorm you've ever been in, but it's firebrands. And that's where we get area ignition and the wind's coming, it's preheating all the fuels. At that point, it's too late. So there's a reason why we're giving those orders. So don't wait until you see stuff physically that's telling you to leave. You wait until we give you that warning and that order. That's go time at that point. It's non-negotiable.
I want to put you in the perspective of when that fire engine shows up at your property and you've chosen not to evacuate. Everybody still hear me? Okay. So when that happens, all of a sudden one firefighter gets assigned to be a babysitter, right? All of a sudden now, Jeff, you're babysitting the occupant because our priorities are what? Life and property, right? Life before property. So we cannot now, you know, neglect that human being that's there, that's chosen to stay. That takes one man, woman, or Martian off our team, right? We now are down to 2 to 3 maybe that are going to try to defend your home, because we have to babysit that human being and make sure that they're going to survive this, even though we're worried that we're going to survive it, right? So when you choose not to evacuate and you stay there, you put a wild card in the component for us, and right? And we know all of a sudden you become the priority, not defending your property, right? And I will tell you that for us, sometimes we commit to properties that may be a wild card for us, but we have protective equipment, we have training, we have tools, we know what to do when things go sideways. That's what we have, that muscle memory that y'all don't have. So when you don't evacuate, you make our job harder, you make the sheriff's department job, you make that. I've watched videos, I can't even watch them anymore, the 2017 videos of sheriffs trying to evacuate. It turns my stomach. I can't watch it, because they were putting themselves in harm's way. And not that those people had waited to evacuate, don't get me wrong, but I'm telling you, watching those, you know, law enforcement officers putting themselves in harm's way where we have protective equipment and that's our job, that was really hard for me to watch. Please, if you get that warning, get out. Don't put us in that challenging position to have to be a babysitter of your life, because you will take priority over your house. You will, all day long and twice on Sunday.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Cindy. We're starting to cut into our Q&A time, but I have a comment and one last question that I think is really important before we start taking the questions. One comment is with regard to preparing to evacuate. If you've got a large RV or a trailer or something like that, and you don't want to have to leave it behind when you're ordered to evacuate, when when your spidey sense is activated, or certainly when you get the evacuation warning, go move it, take it somewhere safer, drive it, out of county to a lot somewhere, and secure it. But don't try to be dragging that thing out of there in the heat of the moment, because somebody who does that's going to jam up the road for everybody else and trap people down a long one-way street. One of my.
You're not going to take the time to hook it up right. Yeah. And there's going to be some crazy malfunction that's going to happen. Don't saddle the community with you trying to get your RV out.
Yeah. And then the last question I wanted to ask you guys before we go into the Q&A is, what happens if, you're trapped and unable to evacuate? What if that happens and you can't leave? What are some things that someone can do, if they are stuck? Either Cindy or Jeff or any of you.
So I think Jeff and I'll tag team on it. Obviously, when we have those scenarios, right? When we commit to an incident, when we commit to defending a property, we have this quick conversation of, here's our escape routes, here's our safety zones, here's our temporary refuge area. And those are by no means anything that the public should ever have to worry about or live in. However, when you're looking, we know that people survive the toughest fire in pools and things like that. And that by no means is anything that I ever want anybody to have to suffer through or or make that life-changing decision on. But when we're looking at areas where we think that we can survive, is sometimes we have to take refuge back in the structure and wait for the fire front to come through and know that the structure is eventually going to catch on fire, but that we may be able to come out and find another area of refuge. It may be that creeks and pools and water sources are where we take that refuge. It's not ideal. Areas where there is no vegetation, so dirt fields, horse pastures that are, dirt and open, no vegetation. It is truly, that is truly a point of survival at that point. Roadways, asphalt, lawns, big football fields, golf courses, areas where you have little to no vegetation or very lush green vegetation, asphalt, in a car, in an open parking lot. Those are some of those things you're looking for. Jeff, you want to tag on that?
Yeah, so I don't want to dive too much into fire behavior, but one of the things that we do have in some of these areas is vineyards, and that can be a safe place to go. So Cindy kind of hit a lot of the key points. But when it comes to fuel, I don't want to be next to a fuel that's going to be burning really hot for a long period of time. The most volatile fuel that we have up here is brush. Now, grass is a light, flashy fuel. It'll ignite quickly, but it'll turn to black quicker than brush or to larger fuels like timber. We want to try not to be mid-slope on a mountain. We want to kind of be on a turn where it's kind of curving out, not curving in, because that means we're in a drainage. So we're just trying to think about the way that fire moves on a mountain. One analogy that I always give people, imagine that you're on the top of a mountain and you pour 1 million gallons of water down that mountain. Wherever that water goes down that mountain, that's where your fire energy is going to go because of preheating of fuels, because of box canyon, chutes, chimneys. Those are saddles. Those are the types of areas that we want to not find ourselves in. So if you find yourself in a vehicle, make sure that you have your phone, the windows up. You don't want to be bringing air from the outside in. You want to keep your car running. You want to have your headlights on. You want to have your hazards on. That way that we can see where you're at. You want to always know where you're at so that you can call for help, let people know where you're at. During the Tubbs fire, we had multiple people that sheltered in place at the Mark West Lodge. They made it. Thankfully, not an area that I would have said, hey, let's go to the lodge because you're at the bottom of a huge drainage. So, it's a better area might have been up at Camp Newman in the football field. But, they found themselves in the predicament they were in. There was fire engines around them, sheriff's officers around them, and they were able to make a defensible stand to keep those people safe. But Cindy and I are always hesitant to talk about this because what we really want to hammer home, what we've been talking about for nauseum the last hour, is to prepare yourselves and to just obey the evacuation warnings and orders. A lot of times you're going to be in a warning and we're staggering that so we don't get log jams on these roads getting people out. So if you're in a warning, there's a very good chance that very soon you're going to be in an order.
Great point, Jeff. And let's be honest about that. That's exactly how the 2019 Kincaid fire went down. It was a methodical process by all of our agencies looking at mapping and modeling, and it's okay, pull the pin on Windsor, wait 4 hours, pull the pin on here, it was a methodical process. Mind you, all y'all needed to evacuate, but we had to strategically plan that and we had log jams, don't get me wrong. They just weren't the log jams that we would have had till we waited to do the order for everybody. So trust your officials, trust your emergency responders, trust us. When we give you that, if we give you that warning, I'm sorry, I'm just telling you right now, get out, please. Don't make me order you. Don't make Misty order you. Don't make a fire engineer, please just pack your stuff. And I'm telling you, we'll do our best to say what we can say, but please get out. Please get out.
Yeah, I think that the way I like to share the experience with people is I feel like as a culture, we need to get comfortable with evacuating. I think we need to be as comfortable evacuating as we are, you know, packing up and going to some music concert, the Shoreline Theater or something. You know, it has to be that routine. It's like, okay, I'm going to go see, you know, Paul Simon. What am I going to take? Well, I'm going to take this and this and this. And I'm going to take
And your
that.
dogs and your cats and your horses and your goats.
Well, you know, within reason. You know, so that's the level of comfort I think we need to be with this. You know, it's just got to be boom. And then the last thing I want to just kind of elaborate on before we go into questions is, you know, don't imagine that you're going to stay at a big football field or a vineyard or whatever. You know, that's a survival place. That's not a quote unquote safe refuge area. Don't think that that's going to be a fun place, because it's going to be hot. It's going to be smoky. It's going to be windy. It's going to be ugly. You're going to get pelted with debris and embers and everything else. It's not going to be a fun place. We're talking survival. So don't plan on staying at a place like that. You know, when Jeff and Cindy are talking about those places, those are exactly what they said. That's for survival if you've got nowhere else to go. But don't plan on doing that. Plan on leaving early. So I'll get off of my soapbox now. And, just so folks know that I'm looking at the questions, and because we're trying to focus on evacuation with this particular webinar, I'm going to first take the questions that are specific to evacuation. And then if we have time, we'll talk about some of the other ones related to, you know, like fields management, etc. So I'm going to go through the list and grab some that I think are really pertinent to our discussion. Here's one. What did you all learn about communicating about evacuation procedures from the Kincaid? What worked? What will improve next time? Well, I think clearly a lot has already improved, but maybe Misty, you can talk to us first about this. What else has improved that we haven't already covered?
I think for us, it's using consistent terminology, which we touched on, warning and order, so everybody gets the same message across the board. And also communicating in Spanish. That's a really big deal. We have about 30% of our population is Latino, and many of them are Spanish speakers. So we had consistent information, not only evacuation order, but follow-up information, so that all members of our community or more members of our community could get that information. And I think it's learning how to do repopulation reentry better. And that's really, I think, where we have a lot of opportunity to improve. It's the backside, the flip side of evacuation is how to get everybody back in, right? And so that's where the mapping, I think, is going to be a really helpful tool. And we learned more and more, and we're continuing to learn how to best describe the areas of letting people back home, because that's where it's really emotional, it's really stressful, it's really hard to be evacuated. It's really hard to not know whether or not your house is standing. It's really hard not to know if, you know, when you're going to be able to go back. So, you know, we learn more and continue to learn more as far as communicating exactly how repopulation and reentry happens.
Regarding gate access, when they do evacuate, is it recommended that the gate be left open or shut?
When you leave?
Yeah, anybody?
Yeah, I would say open, to leave the gate open. And it's a question that always kind of comes up with people are concerned about looting and everything, which are valid concerns with, you know, opportunists that come in during these times. And so it's a trade-off. But if you have a gate that's open, it's easier access for the firefighters and the sheriffs to come in, clear that structure, have us come in, turn our engines around, set up for structural defense. It saves a step, especially if there's a power outage and you don't have a backup generator and we're having to manually open gates. So I personally like it when the gate is open. If there's huge security concerns, I understand that. At the end of the day, it comes down to a personal comfort level.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Jeff, about the access. It's really important because that way it allows the deputies to check whether or not you've actually evacuated or not. And on the security point, I know that's always a concern too, and I get it. We take security really throughout the, you know, our job as at the sheriff's office is to issue those evacuation orders, but it's also to maintain that evacuation zone for the duration of that order. So we get, as you've probably seen, hundreds and hundreds of people to help us through mutual aid to help us maintain security in the area. So not only do we have people who are at those roadblocks preventing people from getting in, but we have deputies and assisting agencies patrolling the evacuated zones. So in case anybody did get in to cause harm, then we can take care of it from there. And we have a zero tolerance policy when it comes to looters and people who shouldn't be there, that none of us take kindly to that. So it's I just want you to be reassured. I know there's no perfect solution, but I just want you to be reassured. It's very much top of mind for us. Once your safety is no longer at risk and we've gotten you out of the way, the next step for us is property, as Cindy mentioned earlier, and making sure that we're keeping your property and your house as safe as we can while you're gone.
Yeah, and I think what's helpful too there, Misty, is to, as much as you can, is to publicize the fact that looters do get, arrested for doing what they're doing. I think that.
Yeah, we do. We usually put it on social media too and let people know, because nobody, to be honest.
Perfect. This one might be for you, Jeff. Regarding the NOAA radio, what technology did you mention we need to make sure the radio has?
Yeah, that's a great, I saw that question on there. Yeah, so it's called SAME technology. What that stands for is Specific Area Message Encoder. So if you just go to your phone and Google SAME technology weather radio, that kind of technology will come up. SAME, Specific Area Message Encoder.
Okay, perfect. Okay, somebody wrote, can you please give us the numbers to call for the 411? So I think that's really just paying attention to the social media, right? Misty, can you handle that? Or not social media,
but for you.
So information.
Yeah, back in the day, we used to call 411, and which I don't know if that still exists anymore, but that might be showing my age, right? 211. 211 is the new 411. So 211 is the county's helpline that is always set up. Right now, they're using it a lot for COVID, but it's your catch-all, I need information, I have questions, I need resources line. So it's not set up immediately when a fire starts, because there's just a delay. It's just the nature of the beast. There's a delay as we are all trying to get situational awareness and understand what we're dealing with, but they set it up as soon as they can. So 211 is the best phone number to call. SoCo Emergency is the emergency website by the county. They'll post more information. And Sheriff's Office Facebook, we post things live constantly on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We issue notices and we give updates as much as we can and photos as much as we can throughout the duration of the incident to give you a little bit more knowledge and situational awareness too. And I know Sonoma County Fire District, you guys have a great social media presence too. And so I imagine you do the same thing, but usually I'm so busy posting, I don't have a chance to look at your posts. So I imagine you guys are doing similar work too.
Well, and
you just reminded me, Misty, to ask a question. Now, we talked earlier about staffing up fire engines and those kinds of resources, but doesn't, in these times like that we feel like we're leading into a potential event, doesn't the Sheriff's Office and the Emergency Operations Center, don't they have it set up to where they will start to preload or at least put people on call or things like that in advance?
Yes. Yeah, so there's kind of a separation there. So we've got the Sheriff's Office and the Emergency Operations Center. So the Emergency Operations Center is run by the county, and that's kind of all the behind the scenes logistics that are happening. The information sharing, logistics for setting up shelters, for getting resources to the shelters, setting up 211, things like that. So oftentimes the county will sort of, they'll have like a warm, they're running it warm, I think is their term, or they have a warm opening, something along those lines where they have it sort of lightly staffed. So that way they're more prepared during those red flag warning seasons. They already have staff on duty and they can already respond more quickly. At the Sheriff's Office, we always have people on duty. We are a 24/7 operation and we're always awake, right? And so we've always got dispatchers on duty. We've always got deputies on duty patrolling neighborhoods. So for us, we don't upstaff for that because we're already there.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thanks. Let's see. Somebody wrote, oh, here's a good one, right? That kind of pigtails on that, I think. It'd be really helpful to understand how you professionals decide that it's time for an evacuation warning or order. What does cause that trigger point?
I like that. I'll start, and I definitely want to hear from you guys too, from the fire folks, because you're the experts. So the evacuation warnings or orders are coming from the Sheriff's Office, and it depends a little bit on the situation. Using Kincaid for an example, we saw the fire kicking off. We saw that people were in immediate danger and started the evacuations. As the fire built a little bit and we were working with our fire partners and making those communication connections and could see the path of the fire and where it was headed, that's when we called that evacuation warning for Geyserville. Once we saw the fire was coming down the hill more, and again, working with our fire partners and listening to their recommendations, ordering the order for Geyserville. Once we have the luxury of time, we have a lot more planning that goes into it. So we mentioned earlier about Kincaid, where everybody was at the table. It was literally everybody was at the table. Once CAL FIRE was on scene, it had been a couple days, the incident team was up and running, and we relied on the modeling from CAL FIRE and the fire experts telling us, this is the path of the fire. These are the people who are gonna be in the path of the fire. They're the ones who need to get out. So part of it is based on science and recommendations from our fire partners, and part of it is just, we know because we can see the immediate threat, and that's what we're trained to do, is identify threats and get people out of the way. But I want to hear from our fire friends too.
Yeah, that's great, Misty. And all of that is actually spot on. And the one thing that we go under when we get into these conditions is unified command. And unified command essentially brings all the experts from each discipline, i.e. being fire and law enforcement and dispatch and the state and all of these agencies. We all get the experts in those fields in the same room together with maps and computers and including the National Weather Service. And so not to mention we all get in the room together and start looking at these maps and start looking at things. Look at all of that stuff is happening in the foreground long before this fire ever hits us. Let me just explain to you that when we went into the 2019 Kincaid fire, we days in advance before that fire actually settled itself in Geyserville, we were told by the National Weather Service on our daily staffing meetings, because that's what happens is all of the chief officers, whether it be fire, law enforcement, dispatch, CAL FIRE, all of us get on these calls every single day, and it's usually 2 to 3 times a day. We're on these conference calls with all of the experts in the weather field, all the experts in the fire behavior field, and we're saying, hey, look, this weather front's coming in. What do we need to be concerned about? What are areas that we need to be worried about? We knew in advance of this system coming in where our target hazard areas were going to be. And so, for example, the word historical, I said this in a community meeting the other day. This was the first event that I've ever been involved in where days in advance of this fire settling itself in Geyserville, the National Weather Service was saying, this is historical weather coming into your area. And when we hear the word historical in the fire service and law enforcement, those perk our ears, right? Those are not words that are thrown around lightly for us. So that word historical got thrown out very early, and that word carried itself all the way through till the day we got a handle on that thing. We used that word historical, and it was truly all of that and then some. So we are all at the table, as much as we were all at the table before the 2017 fires, but it is a very different arena now. We are all at the same table. We have, like I said, when we're moving into these weather patterns, we're moving into these red flags and these PSPS events, we are all literally on the phone with each other 3 times a day.
Great, thank you. Now, there's a couple questions with regard to interagency coordination. So I'll paraphrase what I think they're asking. With regard to interacting, for instance, with the city of Santa Rosa or even neighboring, maybe other cities too, and also neighboring counties, how close are we connected with in terms of the, evacuation methodologies? One of the questioners points out that in an earlier event, there was some conflict, I guess, between, the county and city or something like that. Are we more on the same page these days?
I would just speak to that for a second, because that kind of happened in kind of my response area. Is there were some conflicting messages that were sent out. So what I want to say first and foremost is that if you were to ever get a conflicting message, you go with the most conservative message. That first and foremost. But as you know, we're dealing with technology and we're dealing with humans. So sometimes things happen. We're not perfect. We're not telling you guys that we're perfect, but this is our systems that we practice, we train on, and we implement it. And sometimes glitches happen. So we go with the most conservative approach. So in short, we are on the same page and we have the same mission to protect lives, property, and the environment. And we work extremely well together.
Okay, and then another interesting question came up was, and I think there's new legislation, if not in place, but headed this direction. How long will the cell phone towers operate? And, you know, I think generally I would expect them to operate about 4 hours historically on their battery power, but maybe you guys can help me out. I think there's legislation in the works to cause them to last longer.
Yeah, Roberta, not only is there legislation out there, but there's actually active, we're seeing permit requests come in, you know, every couple weeks for backup power system for cell towers. So a lot of these providers are coming to the table long before the legislation comes down, because whoever made that comment is accurate. There is legislation out there, and it's being driven by many, many different facets, and some of that being emergency services, right? But a lot of these providers are coming to the table early on in the game, because really we were finding these cell towers, if they didn't burn up, which is what happened in 2017, when we go into PSPS or into the 2019 situation, we are finding they were going some 24, at the highest 48 hours, and that was a big stretch. So they're now all bringing in these, you know, augmented generators with, you know, fuel tanks. And so we're getting permits that are coming through, and Roberta can respect that, but we're getting a lot of permits that are coming through for these generators with backup fuel tanks or belly fuel tanks, if you will, to be able to kind of, you know, augment, as opposed to where they used to really operate off battery and solar and things like that. We're finding those weren't really towing the line, right? So we're seeing a lot of cell sites in the area that are coming in with augmented power solutions, if that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to marry that to another inquiry we have with regard to, you know, your cell service. You know, if we're out for extended period times with the PG&E shutoffs, as long as, it's my belief and understanding that as long as the cell towers have power, your cell phone will still work. So you could still stay engaged in that way. And I think the concern about the inquiry is, you know, what happens when I don't have my ability to connect with my cell phone for whatever reason, i.e. power outage, and other methodologies. I have no way. She suggests, I think, to use like KSRO, listen to KSRO. I know that's what I did during the Kincaid event. I had KSRO on 24/7. So isn't that a good way to stay up to date?
I think that absolutely is. And I think the message we've all communicated today is you cannot rely on one methodology to keep you connected, to keep you informed. You have to have many tools in your tool belt, because those cell towers, you cannot look in the 2017 Tubbs fire. I'll be really frank with you, all those cell towers burned as that fire came over the hill. We had, even amongst our own crews, had no communication. We were really just on our own. And so I will tell you that having many tools in your tool belt, as Misty has said, as Jeff has said, as Roberta said, you have to take your power back and set yourself up to not just rely on that crazy little device that we do all of our life through. You need to get yourself a radio. You need to get yourself a NOAA radio. You need to find other resources to keep yourself connected or vetted or whatever you want to call it. Again, redundancy is the key to being prepared and being informed.
this question is a really good one, I think, and pertinent. The inquiry is, how do I mark my house to let folks know that it is in fact evacuated? Is there a system in place?
We don't have
Yeah.
a fail-safe way in this point, and really, quite frankly, in the sheriff's department, they've got to have a pretty accurate way to account for that because it's really on them. It's so, Misty.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad you brought up because we're hearing more and more about this. So, Cindy, you're absolutely right. There's no formal system in place for evacuation tags and things like that. Other counties do use those, like a little evacuated tag that you can put on your house when you leave. What we have seen is that neighborhood groups independently are creating like a tagging system. So they have, a pink ribbon or whatever their symbol is that they tie on their gate or they tie on their doorknob when they leave to indicate evacuated. Most of the time they're using that at their local level through their COPE teams or through their CERT organizations. They're using that so that the neighborhood, not the block captains, but the leaders of those teams can kind of account for everybody. Until we have a formal system in place, which may very well be the case, we're working with the Department of Emergency Management right now because that's been kind of a repeated request that we're receiving. Every neighborhood's doing it a little bit differently.
And when we're clearing a neighborhood, doing the high-low sirens and going to house, we're going to check. And me in this neighborhood, I'm still going to check if I saw something, a little flag or something, because I want to make sure that you're out and your life's more important, and I'll take the time to do that. So we're not there yet, I think is what Missy was saying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a few questions in the queue about COVID, and I know we talked a little bit about it. Feels like maybe we want to talk a little bit more about that in terms of, what to do. And like you said earlier, Misty, I think the most important thing to remember is, your immediate life safety comes first. So get out the area first. Yep. And if you haven't thought about it already, at least do that. In my opinion, probably the simplest and most important thing to do is to, update your contacts, on your, on your list of evacuation stuff. Update your contents or your contacts so that that wherever it is you're going to go, you'll be staying with people that, aren't going to give you the COVID, and you're not going to give it to them. I think that's probably the quickest, simplest, easiest. I personally would not be interested in staying at a shelter. I would rather stay in my car. I would have no problem, sleeping in my car. Done that before. But what do you guys suggest? Anything? Any
So
ideas?
this is a really big issue right now because we are hearing people, community members saying, I'm not going to evacuate because of COVID. And so we always use the term, don't hesitate, evacuate. We get that you may not want to go to a shelter. Totally get that. And Roberta made a really great point. There are thousands of people in our last 3 years who have taken shelter in their car at Walmart or, wherever it may be. I want to say Kmart, but that wasn't a great example. Sorry. But, so we get that. However, what you need to take into account, at some point, you're going to need to use resources, right? You're going to need to use facilities, whether it be food or restrooms or showers or, whatever it may be. So take masks. Here's the irony. We need to update our go bags. And frankly, we need to update our go bags every year. Really needs to be something that you put into your phone as a calendar reminder of, got to update my go bag, whether you got a new dog, a new kid, an elderly female, a medication that you're not used to, you're now wearing glasses, you've now got this health issue. We have to update our go bags just like we have to update our emergency supply kits, right? I always tell people, this is the thing we live and die by now. Put a calendar invite to yourself to every year, come April, update your go bag. Every year, come whatever, update your emergency supply kit. Take those food supplies that are gonna expire in 6 or 8 months, take them to the food bank. Share the wealth, right? You've got to set yourself reminders. I keep saying, take your power back. We cannot do this all for you. So, in your emergency kit, guess what, this year that you didn't need last year? You need face masks, you need hand sanitizer, and you need disinfectant wipes. Sorry, it just is what it is. Not saying you got to go to a shelter, but at some point you're going to need to use public resources. So protect yourself, arm yourself, be ready, stay in your car. I'm all for that. Do what you got to do, but you're going to have to engage with the public at some point.
I know that they're looking at different shelter locations or expanding a number of shelter locations, because you hit the nail on the head, Roberta. There's going to be fewer people allowed per shelter in order to maintain the social distancing that everybody's going to need. So they're looking at not only the sanitation procedures, they're looking at for the population within those shelters and other shelter alternatives. They are asking people to identify 2 other locations that you can go to as well. So they'll take people, absolutely. They're getting their planning in place for that, but they're also asking people to identify 2 places that you can go. So that way it reduces the burden on the shelters because they're not going to be able to accommodate as many people per shelter location. So I would reiterate what Cindy was saying earlier about find the place that works for you, find family or friends. Hotels and motels work great too, but it's first come, first serve. But find those locations that people are comfortable taking you in and you're comfortable being with them. Either, instead of a shelter, or if the shelters are full, it's always good to have redundancy and have those plans in place. You don't have to think about it during the moment.
Okay, I think we covered this, but I don't know if you want to talk about it more. If I had to endure at my property at my home, what should I do to stay on my best chances for surviving? Like you said, Cindy, I think shelter in place, close the windows. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
My knee jerk is evacuate. Don't get yourself in that position. That should be a holy cow, this snuck up on me and I just got to survive. I am really cautious to give you that recommendation as I'm going to stay, and what do I do if I stay and this happens? That's a really hard thing for me, and I think Jeff would agree. That's a really hard thing for me and Misty too, is that we don't want you to be in that position. I almost don't want to give you advice on I'm going to stay and here's what I should do. But I do respect that there are going to be people that are going to make that decision. And so with that said, you're thinking about a survivability. So you have to put yourself in that mindset of where am I going to go to survive this? And I can't outline every situation that is, something that's patent for you. It depends. There's just too many factors that to give you that advice on what you should do and how you should do it is putting ourselves in a very liable position. And I want you to evacuate and I want you to get to a place of safety. However, if you are trapped, survivability, and Jeff, jump in.
Yeah, so I just want to talk about a coworker that I lost in a fire during the Cedar fire, and they were protecting a structure, and they got hit by the fire from an area that they weren't expecting. They ran to retreat into the fire. He tripped. There were some juniper bushes there. He inhaled probably some superheated gases, and he died. His name was Stephen Rucker, and he died in that fire during the Cedar fire down in Julian. So they went to shelter in the house, and then the house caught on fire. And these are firefighters that have 20 plus years of experience, and they all thought that they were going to die. And they had the training, they had the equipment, they had the gear, they had the fire engine, they had SCBAs on, and the house started to catch fire. Thankfully, one other firefighter was super critically injured and had some burn inhalations. So I'm just kind of telling you that story just to reiterate what Cindy's saying. So if you were to find yourself in a fire and you didn't evacuate, or you didn't get enough time to evacuate because the origin of the fire, let's say, was close to you, you're going to have to probably shelter in your house, and you're going to have to probably be in that house when it's starting to catch fire, and hopefully that fire front will go out. So how do you prepare yourself for that situation? You harden your home. You harden your home. And you harden your home, and we're giving you resources on how to do that, and you evacuate.
Well
That's it.
said. Yeah, absolutely well said. It's as I
Yeah.
told you guys earlier when we were offline, I used to be a stay and defend gal, but I'm no longer. I'm leaving. I'm not going to wait around. You know, I'm an experienced firefighter and I have tools and I'm still pretty healthy, but I'm not going to go into the whole story. But I got to a point where I've decided I'm not going to try to save my home. You know?
Let's be honest. She sells herself short. You're talking about a seasoned 30+ year fire veteran who was on a fire engine for most of her career, and then in fire prevention for the latter part of that. And she is telling you that I used to be all stay and defend, and now I'm like, oh no, I need. If you're hearing her say that you need, as much as maybe none of us are making that message to you, if Roberta's telling you that, she's got 10+ years on both Jeff and I, and has seen probably a bit more than we have in our career, and she's telling you that she's gonna leave. Come on.
Yeah, during the Kincaid fire, I opened my house up because I have a generator, you know, and friends and neighbors would come over to charge their cell phone and we'd visit. And a friend of mine asked me, she's like, oh, when we have to evacuate, when the winds shift, can we caravan out? And I go, well, I'm not leaving.
I'm not gonna be here.
And she asked me a very profound question. She asked me why, and I didn't have a good answer for that. So guess what? I'm not staying. It's just stupid. So another question, and I think I know the answer to it, but I'm going to have Misty confirm this. Somebody asked if you guys will call the landlines during your emergency alerts as well as others.
Yes. Thank you for asking it, because I forgot during my list of everything. Another resource that the Sheriff's Office has is functionally reverse 911. We use it during fires. We historically have, and we challenge with that. There's a couple of challenges. Number one, a lot of people don't have landlines anymore. The other challenge is that there's a difference between a copper landline, like the old actual telephone lines that we used to have, and VoIP, which is voice over internet protocol. So like an internet-based landline. So the reverse 911 always works with those copper landlines, but it may or may not work with VoIP. It's touch and go. So yes, it is another tool that we use. Thank you for bringing it up.
Okay, and then some of these remaining questions I think are really localized, so I'm going to toss them out there, and maybe you guys will know more about the backstory than I do. Michael writes, as a rancher on St. Helena Road and unable to leave on that road, however, it is possible to escape toward the northeast, but there are many rural gates. What can be done to access those dirt roads?
Let me talk to Mr. Gleason. He's an old friend of mine and neighbor. Hi, Michael. So that's a great question. And I, at the end of the day, it can be hard when you're up in those areas to get out. I would say for that area that you're in is to have bolt cutters to be able to get through those gates. Make contact with those homeowners now. So that if you're up in the mountains on St. Helena Road, that you know which way it is to go. I just did Diamond Mountain. We were driving the fire roads with that community and how to access them. The problem with a lot of these fire roads is they're overgrown with vegetation. There's not a lot of maintenance on them, and you might find yourself in a very precarious situation. So hopefully where you're at, Mike, on that ranch is you'll have a good bird's eye view of kind of what's going on. But again, evacuation warnings, go ahead and get out. That is a precarious drainage, the St. Helena drainage. I think the fire history kind of goes back to they call it the Great Fire in late 1800s. So it's prime. It hasn't burned in a long time. There's a lot of fuel loading. I know that the Mark-West Fire Council has been working on writing grants to get improvements on that road, to get fire breaks. And it's a tenacious community and they're going to get it done. They're the ones who kind of spearheaded what we're doing tonight. So I would say that kind of leave early, make contact with those ranchers, know those ways. The first time you want to drive those roads isn't during a fire. So good question. And you can always call me and I'll help you with that.
And kind of along those lines, Penny asks, 2 ways out, but really Calistoga Road is our, I guess, only way out. is there a second way to get into Santa Rosa? Can one of you guys respond to that? Who's familiar with the area?
Yeah, from Calistoga Road, again, the fire roads. So we're working with Chief Tuberville from CAL FIRE, updating these fire road maps. But the best roads to be on are the ones that are paved. We don't want to find ourselves on these fire roads as secondary means of egress because they're just overgrown. They're in the country. There could be potholes. They're hard to navigate. So Calistoga Road, your options are pretty much to go down that way towards the city limits, or heading back towards Petrified Forest Road. But historically, that's where the wind's coming from and that's where the fires are coming from. But there's not a lot of options on this mountain. And so that's why it's just really good to heed these evacuation warnings early.
Okay. And then Joanne writes, are you coordinating with a COPE program? I think most definitely we are, aren't we?
Yeah.
Should I continue to try to collect information? I'm not sure if that's a logistical thing or.
So so much of our Mark West watershed area and our Mark West folks, St. Helena, Calistoga Road, Petrified Forest, are all very connected and very active with COPE groups or wildfire adaptive communities. And so I think that there are just great connections to be made through those. If you are not connected with them, Lynn Garrick's on here. She can get you moving in the right direction. The thing that we have really learned from the 2017 Tubbs fire is that we need to build communities within our communities. And that's the best way I can explain this. Is we are not looking for people that learn how to fight fire, how to shore up buildings when an earthquake happens, how to direct traffic, how to use a fire hydrant. We are not looking for folks that have that skill. We are looking for you to become self-sustained, caring, providing communities where you guys have the ability to connect with each other, provide information, support, and guidance. And the other thing is to know and understand and help the vulnerable population within your community, because you're going to know those, you're going to be intimately involved with them long before we ever are. So I think the best message we can take away from this: create defensible space, pay attention to the warnings, get registered, create a community within your community, help us out, take your power back. And, do what you can to support those in your community who need it more than you do.
That was really beautifully said, Cindy. And I would add that the Sheriff's Office, we are here to support you in that effort. And I think you guys too at the Fire District are there to support them as far as imparting knowledge and presenting at groups and things like that. We've done a lot of that work with our COPE groups all over the county and helping them understand evacuations and alert and warning and all of that. And we're happy to show up virtually now to help support you in that effort as well.
There's a couple of questions in the queue I do want to kind of tidy up, so bear with me. One, I think I'll try to answer. If you want to weigh in, that's fine. If not, that's okay. The question is regard to sirens in that area, the outside audible sirens. Sirens don't work well in hilly areas. They work well on flat areas. That's pretty much it, period, stop, end of story. Do you, Jeff or Cindy, want to weigh in on that?
I do want to talk about that because after the Tubbs fire, I was kind of a proponent of sirens, and then I've kind of changed. And it can kind of get very emotional and political even at times regarding sirens. So sirens were designed initially to get people to go inside during tornadoes and other kind of outside weather events to shelter in their homes. They aren't the greatest at penetrating our dual pane windows, our energy efficient homes that we have now. And so, and then also you have a siren. What does that mean? What is it? How do you cancel that siren? It gives us more questions than answers. And I think you hit it on the nail on the head, Roberta, is that up here in this area, it just is hard to get into these canyons and into these trees. I am not a proponent of sirens.
Yeah.
And you have power backup issues. very costly. It's very you have to test them. There's other means that we're talking about, Nixle, SoCo alerts, NOAA radios. I mean, I think that we're pretty stacked pretty heavily on how to notify people that the redundancy of a siren does not seem cost effective and doesn't seem as beneficial. That's my professional opinion.
And I really have to take on Jeff's comment, because he is hitting the nail on the head. And I think that those of us in emergency response understand the public's perception of what that resource to them could mean. However, with that said, when we watched the 2017 Tubbs Fire storm over this mountain that I'm sitting on right now as we speak, it blew out every resource in its path, and that would have included sirens. It would have included every infrastructure we would have put up. It ate everything in its path, and it ate it up quickly, long before we could even get up here or get out of here. So I think we just, I keep circling back to take your power back, look at all these resources we have. Spread your wealth in how you attain that knowledge, and don't hang your hat on one particular thing to let you know, or one particular alerting system to let you know what's happening in your community.
Yeah. Okay, and then I've saved this one question for last. I kind of touched on it a little bit with my own story, but I deliberately saved this one for last because this is the toughest question of all. And, Penny writes, my husband and a couple neighbors have a tendency to stay behind to defend. What do you say to these kind of people? And my first thought is ask them why. Why are they doing that?
I personally experienced this out on wildland fires. And at the end of the day, there's not much reasoning I can do at that moment with people. And it's a selfish decision to stay because they're preventing me from helping more people. So I don't have the legal authority to make someone leave. The law enforcement, that's when they come in. And so you're taking up resources. And so at the end of the day, you're not going to change everybody's mind. And there's certain things that I'll tell them. So one of the techniques that I'll do is I'll ask them for their social security number. I'll ask them for their dentist and things like that to kind of drive home the situation that they're making, to kind of shake them up into reality. Like, you're choosing that you're going to die here. And so I'll spend a little bit of time, but I'm not going to have a lot of time in dialogue. I got to move on and help people that want to be helped.
And Jeff's making a very hard, difficult point that us as firefighters, we tend to just be very ginger about how we talk to the public. We're here to protect life and property. He made a really firm point when he said he's going to ask you who your dentist is. And the reason he said that is because, look, let's be honest. In the 2017 Tubbs fire, the only way we were identifying victims was through dental records. And that was even a challenge. I'm going to tell you that. That is a rarity. That is a rarity. Usually dental records are, so that is the intensity. That is the aggressive. That is the overwhelming issue that wildfire becomes to human life. And when a guy like him, who will pretty much gingerly tell you everything you need to hear and coax you gently into where you need to be, when a guy like him says, who's your dentist, that really speaks volumes. And we don't usually talk in that kind of reality. It's just not what we do. So you have to understand that's the kind of scope we're talking about, and Misty can speak to. Our deputies, our coroners had horrific responsibilities going out in some of these areas after the 2017 Tubbs fire.
Yeah.
And the identity of these victims was few and far between, and some of them have never even been found. And we know they exist, we just didn't find them.
It's and as deputies and law enforcement, we tend to be far more blunt and straightforward. We kind of have that reputation, and probably for a reason. So I'm just going to say, you are absolutely selfish if you stay behind. Jeff, you mentioned you are 100% selfish if you stay behind. You're putting our deputies at risk, and you are putting our firefighters at risk, because when things go bad and you need help and you call 911 for help, you are forcing other humans to unnecessarily put their life at risk to save you because you made a bad decision. That's the reality that you're up against. So you're being selfish. The other question I would ask is, what is the price of your life? Like, what dollar value would you put on your life? And my guess is most people will say, that's right. It's not $1 million. It's not $2 million. It's not $5 million. You can't put a price on my life. Then why are you putting yourself at risk so intentionally?
Yeah, well said. Well said. Thanks for hanging in there for this extra half hour. And especially thank you to Misty, Jeff, Cindy, and Lynn for hanging out there this extra time. I hope you guys all enjoyed the webinar and got a lot out of it. And yeah, thank you. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you, speakers, for doing this wealth of information. Yeah, and
Thank you so much, Misty, for being here. And we really do have this amazing marriage within our emergency response in this. We've been through hell together, right? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
We have been through hell together, and we've come through at the other side. And we couldn't do it without you. And I think you'd say the same thing about us. So, and look, when we're talking about our Fire Safe Council and the efforts that Roberta puts in, and Lynn, thank you so much. Friends of the Marquess Watershed, all of you, we're all here for a reason, because we all care. We all want to make a difference. We all want to take responsibility. We all want to take our power back. We're all here for the right reasons. And I'm proud and grateful to stand here with each and every one of you. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
all right. We'll see you guys. Have a great evening.